If there is a way for Brandon Moreno to get back to title contention, there is no better place to do it than his home country of Mexico. And he will get that shot to make a statement Saturday night when he takes on Kavanagh as the main event. Moreno, the first Mexican-born UFC champion, has held that title twice, but not since 2023. So the question now is, can the legend of Brandon Moreno grow, or has it already hit his peak? Jacques, more about that. Let's bring in our UFC expert, Brian Campbell. So look, we've seen Brandon Moreno at the top of the flyweight division twice. He is now 32 years old, currently ranked 6th. Kind of give us your version of the evolution of the Assassin Baby.
Yeah, look, he's had one of the more storied, legendary careers that goes beyond just being the face, the ambassador of the mixed martial arts movement in Mexico. One of the greatest flyweight champions in terms of decoration, from the idea of 2 title reigns, big-time victories, and oh, by the way, who can forget that 4-pack of title fights against Davison Figueiredo that were some of the best action fights in this division's history. But a key part of Moreno's story and his evolution is what happened in 2019. He got cut from the UFC following back-to-back decision losses, although albeit against elite competition, including former champion Alexandre Pantoja. He went back to the regional circuit, won a fight under the LFA banner, but what we saw was a retooling and a maturation of Moreno's game. He came back with more patience, more craft, and a much more well-rounded attack. For a fighter who burst upon the scene as a boxer, a brawler, fighting with that Mexican spirit, he quickly became an elite, complete fighter who went on to go unbeaten in his next 7 fights from returning back to the UFC. He won a championship, lost it, and won it back. And in recent years, even though he's juggled wins with losses in some very high-profile fights, and yes, you can hear the whispers that at age 32, have the wars caught up with him. One thing to remember about Brandon Moreno has been his ability to bounce back from defeat. He's been softly written off before and came back to win even bigger fights. And even though it's a replacement opponent on Saturday, the idea, the focus is still there. Can he get back into the title mix, become a 3-time champion in this division? I think certainly what helped him was the title changing hands in December. Now Joshua Van is on top, and a fighter he's had trouble with in the past, Pantoja, is no longer the champion. But when you're talking Moreno, it's been an evolution of a fun action fighter who now can do it all.
As you look, he's such a fun fighter to watch, a very unique style. Now look, I know a lot about the world of MMA. I do not know a lot about video games. And I know that he was inspired by this game, Tekken. The people in the control room tell me I'm saying it right. And his favorite character was Eddie Gordo. And he kind of wanted to get his style like that. I guess it's very flashy. How would you, though, in much better terms, kind of identify his fighting style?
Well, look, it's built upon the striking first. That's how we got to know him. It's that blood and guts boxing style. Obviously, we know combat sports hotbed in the country of Mexico, boxing being the foundation for so many years. And Moreno brought that fighting spirit from the beginning. But key to what you're saying, comparing himself to some of the more, kickboxing style of the video game mode, his evolution into a complete fighter brought forth the evolution of his own kickboxing, using his legs just as much of his feet. And even though he's still known as a fighter who pushes the pace with his hands, he's much more patient, poised, and control. He can look to counter shot you. He's much more thoughtful. He doesn't leave his chin out there like he did in the past, where he can get tagged easy. And he's also evolved to having a very strong wrestling game and can be a submission threat against the right matchup. Here's a guy who has taken on top competition pretty much throughout both of his runs in the UFC, and to still be standing at 32 as a 2-time champion, firmly still in the title mix, yet coming off of a loss 2 months ago. It's really going to be up to Brandon. Can he reinvent one more time? Look, talking to Moreno this week, he thought that stoppage loss to Tatsuro Taira just 2 months ago was a quick trigger by the referee, didn't fully tell the story of where that fight was going. So he'll have an opportunity in Mexico City on Saturday night to redeem himself and show us that evolved, well-rounded attack.
Grew up loving boxing, didn't really know about MMA, finally convinced his mom to take him to a gym. and the rest is history. So looking at somebody who is 32 years old, ranked 6th right now, a two-time champion already, for this win, where would it place him? What does it mean for him?
Look, when you are a former champion and you've got a big name, and look, I mean, UFC will be going to Mexico City for the 8th time on Saturday in company history. It'll be the 5th time that Brandon Moreno is featured in a big event, that you're always going to be 1 to 2 quality wins away from potentially getting that phone call and being in true title contention. And before that knockout loss to Tatsuro Taira in December, we did see Moreno bounce back from a couple tough defeats in the highest level, split decision losses to Pantoja, to Brandon Royval, who has been a rival for him, but he bounced back right away, took a decision from Amir Albazi, took a decision from former title contender Steve Erceg, and firmly established that he's still here. Is he number 6? Yes, at the moment. But even though Lonnie Kavanagh is a late replacement for the injured Asu Amalbayev just 3 weeks before the fight, the opportunity is here the same. And don't overlook what I mentioned earlier. He had a run that hasn't been positive for him against Alexandre Pantoja. Lost to him in an exhibition match in The Ultimate Fighter. Lost 2 title fights to him, including that blood and guts war a few years back that put the title around Pantoja's waist. But Pantoja injured himself against Joshua Van. Van is the new champion from December. He's going to be taking on Tatsuro Taira in his first title defense. A win here for Brandon Moreno, especially with the top of the division reloaded, has to put him firmly in position to get that phone call. Obviously, Manel Kape has a strong case for the next title shot at the top of this division. But if you're Brandon Moreno and you get a victory on Saturday, you're going to get the call again. He delivers in the big moments. He's a ticket seller. But historically, as we're talking about, he's one of the best fighters in this division's history. All you have to do is look at his record to see that.
Let's get your pick to win. And it is interesting when we saw the rankings there. Kavanagh no longer in the top 10. They were just redone. But that doesn't really mean anything when it comes to them stepping in the octagon, because he is such a dangerous opponent, BC. He's a huge prospect in this division. Brandon Moreno is the favorite. He is minus 225 when it comes to the odds makers. Give us your pick to win come Saturday night.
Look, I think this is a good matchup for Brandon Moreno. And you got to give credit to Lonnie Kavanagh at age 26. He's coming off a knockout loss of his own, but he is a for the future type of fighter, a prospect in this division that a lot of people are noticing. And if you're Kavanagh, this is sort of, hey, let's gamble, let's go all in, because if Kavanagh can pull an upset, boy, we are catapulting him into that top 10, and we're talking about big fights. But when you look at the style matchup between the two of them, Kavanagh's aggressive, he goes for the knockout. It's the wrinkles and experience of Moreno that I think will ultimately be the difference. And one thing not to overlook when handicapping this fight, it will be at elevation, of course, in Mexico City. We have seen that play a huge factor before for fighters who are not used to it. You're putting Kavanagh in a 5-round fight under the lights against a fighter in his backyard of Mexico here, who is a god in so many ways, as a pioneer of mixed martial arts in this country. Even with Moreno having that loss just 2 months ago, the stoppage was kind of quick. The fight was competitive up to that point. He seems to have all the right answers to answer the questions of Kavanagh from a striking standpoint. I look for a late round stoppage here for Brandon Moreno to once again show you that he still belongs in the top end of this division, and we'll see whether he's 1-2 more wins away from getting back into that title shot.
That would be a hell of a fight. I mean, this is the main event you want, right? Like in Mexico City, it's always electric, and two guys that are just so much fun to watch. Brian Campbell will talk to you very soon. Stay warm. I know it's cold there. I know for a lot of you watching right now, you have like 10 feet of snow outside, so make sure to tune into UFC Fight Night coming up this Saturday starting at 8 Eastern in Mexico City, and of course you can stream it exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Lonnie Kavanagh will be in hostile territory when he takes on Brandon Moreno for this week's main event for UFC Fight Night. Moreno is going to be fighting in his home country of Mexico Saturday and is itching to shake off his first KO of his career. And as we look at the tail of the tape, as you can see, Moreno comes in with a lot more experience, 34 total fights, a 2-time flyweight champ compared to just 10 MMA fights for Kavanagh, who actually suffered his first MMA loss of his career in his latest fight. As we bring in the one and only CBS Sports combat analyst, Brian Campbell. In BC, this guy Kavanagh, he's very raw when it comes to UFC fights, only 3. So for viewers who don't know about him. What's his MMA background, and how has he turned himself into a guy worthy of the main event spotlight?
Well, I think this is a perfect indication of why he is where he is. You talk about fortune favoring the bold. You've got a fighter here in Kavanagh coming off of his first pro defeat, agreeing on 3 weeks' notice to replace Asu Amobayev to go to his opponent's backyard in Mexico at 7,000 feet of elevation. Oh, by the way, the first 5-round fight of his career on top of that against a former 2-time champion. That tells you about the hunger and belief in this 26-year-old striker who fights out of London at Great Britain Top Team, the same gym that has produced UFC featherweight Nathaniel Wood. And when you look at Kavanagh's rise, he turned pro in 2019, but it was his journey through the regional Cage Warriors promotion in the UK that really started turning heads. That's the same promotion that gave us Conor McGregor, Paddy Pimblett. And what Kavanagh told me this week is he looked at their roads as a blueprint of how to follow to get to the top. He scored a first-round knockout in his Dana White Contender Series appearance in 2024 and then won his first 2 UFC fights. He's confident. He's an aggressive striker who looks for the finish every single time out. And there just simply aren't fighters who will take these type of fights under these circumstances unless they believe they belong at the top. And even though Lonnie Kavanagh is very quick to point out the hiccup that saw him suffer a knockout defeat to Charles Johnson last August, he is more than ready to learn from that, bounce back, and now he's taking on a fixture in Mexican MMA and one of the greatest flyweight fighters of all time.
So you believe that Kavanagh is going to be fully prepared to take down Moreno in your eyes, or do you feel like it could go a different way?
No, and I think the betting odds will show you that. Look, Kavanagh's the rightful underdog, but it's not by a ton, and not all of that is in the idea of what we saw just 2 months ago when Brandon Moreno succumbed to Tatsuro Taira in a second-round TKO loss. Moreno still thinks it was a questionable stoppage, but at 32 years old, Brandon Moreno is still one of the top fighters in this division, ranked number 6. For Kavanagh to accept this fight, it's only because he believes he can win. He told me this type of situation, taking a fight with, in theory, right, on paper, so much against him, is exactly the reason why he fights. To prove people wrong, to show them that he belongs. And he has been grooming himself mentally a long time before this moment. Obviously, the proof will be in the pudding Saturday night, but you want to talk about a potential make or break fight. If Kavanagh loses, hey, that's 2 in a row for a fighter that we saw as a very bright prospect. But what if Kavanagh defeats the former 2-time champion and catapults himself into the top 10? We're talking about big fights right here, right now.
All right, so let's get into that, okay, BC? What's a path to victory for Kavanagh to take down Moreno here?
Well, look, his game is largely, succeeded on the feet. He's a fantastic striker, has good timing, good counterpunching, and when it's time to be aggressive and go after it, he is the type of fighter that looks for the knockout at every single turn. Obviously, he's going to have to deal with the conditioning here. The good news for him going up into elevation the first time on short notice was that he was already preparing for a very important fight in March against Bruno Silva when he did get the call to replace Asu Amobayev. So what he has to do is look to push the pace against Moreno, even though you would think that's counter to what he should do on paper, moving up into elevation. And the reason for that is he's got to find out if Brandon Moreno still has it. Look, I believe Moreno is still as tough as anyone comes in this division, but he's coming off his first stoppage loss in which he succumbed quickly to what Taira had against him in the second round. That opened a lot of eyes to the idea that maybe, just maybe, Moreno's best days are a little bit behind him, only because he has co-authored so many memorable brawls. For Kavanagh, he wants to look to exchange with Moreno. He's obviously got to be careful in getting too deep into a brawl, but I said, look, when I talked to Kavanagh, Moreno's known for these all-action spectaculars. Is this the fight you're willing to engage in? He said, willing to. This is the type of fight I prefer. So matching fire with fire against Moreno in his home country is certainly a daunting task. But when you hear Kavanagh speak about himself and you see his striking on the tape, you can see that there's a lot to work with right here. This could be his true breakout moment, and it certainly came at a time that none of us expected. But when you dare to be great, Chris, and I know you know this through your career, sometimes that right time is right now.
Come on, man. You better preach, all right, BC? Now, when you think about Kavanagh and everything that he's going up against, what's at stake here, win or lose on Saturday? Because I feel like if he could win, that could really elevate him into conversations that give him a lot more respect in the UFC world.
This is a massive opportunity. I used the word catapult to describe it. Look, Brandon Moreno believed when he fought Tatsuro Taira in December that a victory there would have given him a title shot. And you have to look at this division as a whole and realize, despite the fact that Alexandre Pantoja had previously dominated this division, going on a run of title defenses, he got upset by Joshua Van in December. Yes, it was injury-induced, but when a new champion takes over, for all of the contenders, that sort of resets the odds, right? For if you're Brandon Moreno, he's already lost twice to Pantoja. He probably wasn't going to get that opportunity unless the title did change hands. But Moreno lost to Taira, and now Kavanagh's got an opportunity in his opponent's backyard, in a main event, all the things that we were talking about that could be on paper going against him to overcome that. So you're talking about, if he wins, shooting himself right into that top 10, getting a big-time fight. He could legitimately be, if he can pull off the upset on Saturday, 1 to 2 more wins away from a title shot. That's how you make things happen quickly in this sport. It's exactly what happened to Joshua Van, the current flyweight champion, who came into the UFC, won a few fights, got knocked out, just like we saw with Kavanagh. But what did he do after that? Went on a run, got catapulted himself into a title opportunity, and took advantage when the time was there. Flyweight is a crazy division. It's the fastest fighters you can find on the planet. Also, the opportunities flip quickly because there's so much competition in here. So if you're Lonnie Kavanagh and you can pull this upset under these terms, oh, you know UFC matchmakers are going to pick up that phone and dial you again quickly. We could be seeing Saturday the rise of a new star in this division. We could also be seeing a young, promising fighter take a step back with a second straight loss. That's the gamble at play for Kavanagh, and that, by the way, is why we tune in to Paramount Plus. Let's go, let's go.
Let's
All
go,
right,
baby, let's go. Look, BC, we don't know who's going to win this fight, but what we do know, if UFC continues to give us the goods, baby, cannot wait for this action. Brian Campbell, always appreciate the insight, man. And you can watch UFC Fight Night from Mexico City Saturday on Paramount Plus. The main card gets underway at 8 p.m. Eastern. Paramount Plus is the exclusive home for everything UFC, from numbered events and UFC Fight Nights to a vast library of the promotion's greatest fights. Paramount Plus has all your fans covered.